In a world filled with challenges, setbacks, and unexpected turns, some individuals rise above adversity to become beacons of resilience and hope. And today, we have the honor of bringing you a remarkable journey of Coach Darrin Schenck, a true embodiment of strength, perseverance, and the power of the human spirit. So imagine this: from the pinnacle of athletic success to facing life altering obstacles, Darrin Schenck has weathered it all. A former world class athlete turned coach, mentor, and sought after speaker. Darrin's story is not just one of triumph over physical adversity, but a testament to the indomitable nature of the human soul. But what sets Darrin apart is not just his list of accomplishments, but the depth of his character and the resilience he embodies. Battling through injuries, confronting the aftermath of a head on collision with a drunk driver, Darrin's journey could have been defined by despair. Instead, he chose resilience. He chose to turn his pain into purpose, his setbacks into stepping stones, and his struggle into sources of strength. In this episode, Darrin shares insights gleaned from his own life experiences, offering invaluable wisdom for listeners of all ages, but particularly for young people navigating the turbulent waters of college and life beyond. Through his words and actions, Darrin exemplifies the transformative power of resilience, urging us all to embrace the challenges we face as opportunities for growth, and to harness the power within us to pursue self-optimization and lead lives of purpose and service. So, join us as we delve into the inspiring journey of Coach Darrin Schenck, a beacon of hope and resilience in a world in need of both. This is Character Talks, and this is a conversation you won't want to miss. In Character Talks, we aim to unearth the hidden gems of human resilience, courage, and growth. We bring you tales of ordinary people who found themselves in extraordinary circumstances and emerged from the crucible of life forever changed. From tales of facing fear head-on, to serendipitous encounters that altered destinies, and from travels to distant lands that broadened horizons. To battles fought within, we believe that every experience holds the potential to shape us in profound ways. I'm Chris Christie, and this is Character Talks.
Just after it's been cut, and wade through the stream or maybe run through the river, even though you may get just a little bit wet. A bum bum sheeto, a bum bum sheeto. Wow, 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 wow. This is life.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and dive in. For a number of reasons, I'm really excited about this podcast because I spoke with Darrin a few weeks ago, and there are so many relatable things that he's done that I can relate to in my life. And so I'm super excited about this. So Darrin, welcome to another episode of Character Talks.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun today. I'm anxious for a number of reasons because we've done a lot of things that are similar. Our paths have been down somewhat of a similar road, but also some of our interests moving forward align pretty well as well.
Absolutely.
So to get started, I like to start out that first question because everything that I'm doing with the mill and the programs that we're doing are all based around character. So how do you define character, Darrin?
In conjunction with how you typically approach this, I'm going to give you my one word as resiliency. I've had multiple experiences in my life where we're having, it's somewhat forced into being resilient. I mean, you have two choices in some cases. You can lay down and be a victim, or you can stand up, dust off, and try again. And so looking back over the course of my life, Chris, you and I are about the same age, so it's about the same time frame looking backwards. And, there's been multiple occasions where I've been put into a crossroads scenario of, okay, how are you going to respond to this? Are you going to just shrink and let this be the last thing you try? Or are you going to stand up and dust off and try again, or pivot and go a different direction and excel in another area? So one of the first examples I give is when I was 12, I moved to Phoenix and I got drugged kicking and screaming by my parents. That was not my idea, but my life never would have been the same had I stayed back in rural Pennsylvania on the small farm that I lived at for the first 12 years of my life. But probably the most relatable and easy thing to point a finger to is when I was going into high school as a freshman, I was bound and determined to make the wrestling team. My dad was a great wrestler in high school and beyond, and then he went on to coaching after that. I wanted to follow in his footsteps, and I had been trained to do so. And my family didn't have a lot of money, so it was kind of planted in my head as well that my best shot at getting to college was a athletic scholarship, not an academic scholarship. I wasn't the greatest of students, but on the athletic side, wrestling is a very difficult sport, but I had the pedigree to do that. And I was brought up in that environment prior to high school. Long story short, trying to make a position on the varsity team, I shot a takedown. My opponent did what he's supposed to do, but I got injured and I broke I tore some ligaments and broke a bone peripheral to my spine in my neck. And that was the end of that. I did rehab and I, can turn my head and all those things, but I never went back to wrestling because I was strapped to a board and carted off and wheeled to the hospital and then went to a neurological specialty institute and all these things. And quite honestly, it scared the heck out of me. And I didn't want to be in that scenario again. And I didn't trust that the rehab I had done would prevent that kind of thing from happening to me again. That was a crossroad. Do I lay down and just become a face in the crowd? Graduate high school, maybe go to community college, maybe not, whatever. Or do I find something else that's going to be a driving force in my life? And about 6 months later, I found what that was, which happened to be the sport of racquetball.
I love that. And, it's interesting because one of the things we talk about is with the mill is that every day, every second, every minute, every hour is an opportunity for an adventure, for the opportunity for growth in character. And you probably didn't think back when you were getting there that, wow, this was going to be an opportunity for me to really grow my character that's going to shape shape the rest of my life.
Well, the interesting thing is that, in some ways, what I did was probably somewhat of an easier path. I mean, being a wrestler throughout high school and then into college, like I weighed 112 pounds as a freshman. I was a short, skinny kid, but the only open spot on the team was at 98 pounds. So I had to find a way to lose 14 pounds off of my already skinny frame to make weight for that day to make the team. And then I would have had to do that for the next 6 months. Then we're in the off season. If I'm growing, which I certainly would be as a high school freshman, I may have to wrestle at a higher weight next year, surely out of the inability to lose any more weight and remain upright. And so, if I'd have been at 98 and then maybe the next weight class was 105 and then 112, if I would have been losing weight my whole career as a high school wrestler and then getting into college doing the same thing, it is a miserable, difficult experience. Yes, if you're successful, there are a lot of upside to it, but it is probably the most grueling and difficult sport in that aspect. And maybe I saved myself a lot of painful moments and starvation by having that injury occur and then going a different direction.
Yeah, you're probably correct.
Yeah.
In the sport that I coach, a number of my athletes also wrestle, and it's wonderful because it certainly makes them better football players, but
sure,
it is a mentally and physically demanding sport for sure.
No question.
Yeah. So now kind of to establish, I think it's important as listeners are listening to your story a little bit more about now. So Darrin, yeah. So now that you've decided you're not wrestling, you're moving into racquetball. Where is Darrin and how does that kind of lead you? Because I know there's a story there. How does that lead you into where you are now? Give a little bit more story on Darrin.
Sure. So I made the decision at age 15, playing in my first racquetball tournament ever as a complete beginner. I played the lowest amateur division available and got my butt kicked in about 20 minutes. But I hung around the tournament and watched the pros play. And at that moment decided someday I'm going to be one of those guys. Fast forward to age 24, I turned pro and I worked at a health club where I was able to get some guys that were business owners to sponsor me and give me the opportunity to work very little and travel and play competitively. And I did that for 6 years, and I scratched and clawed my way into the top 20 in the world. I topped out at number 18, and I spent 3 years there. I did it till I was completely burned out. And I really should have stopped the year prior to when I did retire. But I had spent most of my adult life at that point working towards that goal. And if I wasn't Darrin Schenck pro racquetball player, who was I? And so retiring I was kind of forced into it from true burnout. I didn't want to look at another hardwood floor for several years after that. I took some time away from the game, and then I started coaching. And that turned out to be one of the most personally rewarding things I had ever done. And I spent 15 years as the head coach of the Arizona State University men's and women's racquetball team.
Yeah.
In that time, I was
Darrin, can I interrupt for just, can you take me back to that moment? Because I wrote it down when you said you were watching the pros and that you wanted to do that someday. What was it? What was the intrigue? What fascinated you and made that decision say, oh, that's what I want to do?
Okay, you asked. All right, so when I was 15, I entered an amateur tournament, or I entered a pro-am racquetball tournament. So the amateur divisions and the pros were there at that same event. I got my butt kicked in the first round of the first day of the tournament in about 20 minutes, but I'm sitting on the bleachers watching the pros play, and the guys are walking around in these cool warm-up suits, traveling around the country playing racquetball. Most of them had an attractive woman with them, whether they were somebody local or somebody who had traveled with them. I'm like, wow, this is so cool. I want to be one of those guys. And so from that moment forward, everything I did was weighed against the measuring stick of, does this get me closer to being a pro racquetball player? And at 24, I finally turned pro and spent 6 years playing professionally. I made it into the top 20 in the world, clawed and scratched my way to number 18, where I topped out, and spent the last 3 years of my professional career at number 18. I burnt to a crisp, retired after that, and then took several years away from the game.
And now you're coaching.
So after that break, I came back to the game, and what I thought, you can probably relate to this. I was asked to do a 1-hour clinic for the racquetball team at Arizona State University. And a guy that I competed against in local tournaments was at ASU at that time. And he was a very good player, but not somebody's style that you would want to mimic. And he certainly didn't have the patience to teach lessons or do anything like that. So he was trying to lead by example as best he could, but he recognized that since I'm somebody who taught lessons and did clinics and things like that throughout my career, I might be a better fit to help some of the newer members on the team. So I volunteered to do a 1-hour clinic, and that turned into 3 hours a night, 2 nights a week, 9 months a year for 15 years. And it cost me money every year I did it, because I had to pay for parking, and I ended up giving some of the kids rackets and stuff like that. So it was a volunteer gig, but I was rewarded so heavily in my own personal satisfaction of doing that it was well worth it and beyond.
Can you share a little bit more about that? Because again, we're preaching to the choir here when it comes to coaching, but for you, what is that? I mean, there is that personal satisfaction, but what is it about coaching?
So the best way I can describe it is I got to teach people who were caterpillars that they were actually butterflies. Let me say that again.
Mm-hmm.
I had the opportunity as a coach to teach people who were caterpillars that they were actually butterflies. I got to help facilitate the metamorphosis from scared high school or scared college freshman, never playing racquetball before in some cases, to a senior playing in the finals of their number 3 spot with a chance to win a national championship and become a collegiate All-American. And the impact that had on someone's own self-belief and personality was incredible. And that was such an amazing thing to be a part of. And I got to do it over and over and over again for 15 years.
Wow, that's super powerful.
I just got chills.
Yeah.
I really did.
Me too.
I
I'm sitting here and it is one of the best parts of coaching.
no question. And I've been to a few weddings. I've still got kids that have me on speed dial that's like, Coach, I got a job interview. What are your thoughts on this? Or, I'm having a little trouble at home. You've been married longer than me. What do I do in this situation? And that's been really cool too, because some of the kids put their time in, graduated, and we never saw each other again after graduation. But some of them, I still interact with quite a few of them on a regular basis, and some of them literally to this day on a weekly basis, which has just been amazing.
Yeah, that's fun. And if there's anybody listening that played high school or collegiate level sports and a coach was out there that made an impact, like clearly Darrin has, take time and reach out, because I tell you that as a coach, when an athlete does that, it is it just makes the early mornings and the long drives in vans and everything else so worthwhile. I don't, not really a regret for me, but one of my favorite teachers was my fourth grade teacher, Mr. White. It's one of the reasons why I still to this day listen to classical music, because if you didn't want to study, then the only thing you were allowed to do, because of course we didn't have cell phones back then, was
Sure.
that you could go to the back of the room and you could put in a cassette tape and you could listen to classical music. Those were the only alternatives in his class. And so to this day, I still have an appreciation and love for classical music. And
Uh,
I wish I had taken the time to reach out to Mr. White when I was older to
yeah.
let him know. So if
Now,
you're listening, take the time.
I have a question for you, Chris. Do
Sure.
you remember any other names of your fourth grade teachers?
I don't know if I remember the names of any of my other teachers all the way
Right.
through high school. A few, of course,
Yeah.
but certainly back then, no. Mr. White was always and has been in my storytelling, has been the teacher, and
Yep.
and for so many different things. I mean, leaving at the end of the day, this course never would be allowed now, but we were leaving at the end of the day. We'd line up. We were not allowed to leave until the bell rang. And if you so much as even put a hand out there, he'd whack you with a ruler. And we loved it. It was because
Yeah.
we knew where it was coming from. And so, yeah, nope, but you're right. That's Mr. White was it. I
Yeah.
remember I remember most of my sports coaches,
Yeah.
but not many of my teachers.
Yep. And exactly to your comment prior to that, sharing that quick little story, that's exactly why anybody in the listening audience should reach out. Because even though some people have, we as coaches and teachers and influencers know that we've had a much more far-reaching impact, but we're never sure how much. And
Mm.
anybody who takes the time to reach out is such a valuable thing to us because, as you said, there's a lot of late nights, early mornings, long drives, personal expense, all, time away from our own families, all those things. And what offsets that and makes it worthwhile is when people share with us the fact that we made a difference.
Yeah, boy, isn't and that is one of the main reasons I think we're on this planet, is to make a difference. That's amazing. So,
I concur.
yeah. All right. So post coaching now, where are we headed?
So towards the end of my coaching career, a few years ago now, I stepped away 2 years ago from that role. But towards the end of it, I had an interesting scenario that, again, on the topic of resiliency, I survived a head-on collision with a wrong-way drunk driver. And while I climbed out of the wreckage largely physically unharmed, it had a tremendous impact mentally and emotionally on me. And it took me a while to get my feet back under me from that aspect. Again, I climbed out of the car. In fact, I probably saved the guy who hit me because we were in a construction zone on a curve at 5 o'clock on a Sunday morning, an hour outside of Phoenix. There's no way this guy should have been where he was, as intoxicated as he was. Third DUI, 3 times the legal limit, driving his girlfriend's car on a suspended license.
Wow.
We crashed. I heard cars coming down the hill, and I turned on my flashlight app on my cell phone and started running up the hill to get the next car to stop. Otherwise, they would have crashed into the crash site. And he had opened his door and slid out and sat there on the highway. And I could smell the alcohol on him from 15 feet away. But when I heard the rest of the cars coming, I knew I had to get them to stop. Otherwise, what was a 2-car crash was about to be a lot worse. And the next car in line that I got to stop was a young family with two young kids in the back in a very small car, like a Ford Festiva or something like that. Like no way that car would have survived an impact if they were coming around the curve and hit us at the speed limit. So that again, not it took me a bit to understand that I was playing the victim with the way I was dealing with it. I tried to bury it. I settled with the insurance company, got a new car, pretended this never happened, and that does not work. So I had to dig it up and face it, head on. Pardon the pun there, but and deal with it. And what that the outcome of that was that I ended up becoming what is called a victim impact panel speaker, a VIP speaker for Mothers Against Drunk Driving. That became very cathartic for me. And the first time I told that story in front of what is the definition of a captive audience? If you get a DUI, you have to attend a court mandated class. I'm one of the speakers that comes in and shares my story from that crash. The first time I stood up in front of an audience of about 40 or 50 people, I had I only had one photo of my car. I had a couple of other pictures that I put into the slide deck of I was heading on to meet my dad to go fishing. So I have a picture of my dad holding a big brown trout and me holding an even bigger one, and some other relevant things, details to that day. I shared my story, and as I got towards the end, I could tell that I was going to be physically ill. So I said, "Hey, everybody, I'll let you get back to the class. Thank you very much." And I all but ran to the door, and I ran outside and threw up in the bushes. My apologies to the Hilton Chandler for probably killing one of their shrubs out front. But there was so much emotion tied up into that I had packed down and tried to not deal with. And telling that story allowed me to release it. Again, pardon the pun, purging it in that moment. But then the next time I shared that story, it was a little easier. And the next time it was a little easier. And once I could tell it in a cohesive fashion, I was starting to get people walking up to me at the end of the class or stopping me on the way out and saying, "Hey, man, I'm not going to remember all these stats that they're sharing with me tonight. I will remember your story. Thank you for sharing that." And that really piqued my interest on trying to do that on a much larger level. And so now I've pursued public speaking in general, but am still a VIP speaker for Mothers Against Drunk Driving. I'm also doing some things at Arizona State University and some of the other colleges and universities in my home state, doing some education around drinking and driving or impaired driving in general, things like that. So I am trying to give back, as much as I can, because clearly I have been granted more time here on Earth for a reason. Statistically, every 38 minutes somebody dies in a drunk driver crash around the U.S. And somehow I walked away from that head-on collision. I was doing 65 miles an hour. I don't know how fast the other guy was going. There was tire marks on my side of the crash site, but not his. How I walked out of that and ran up the hill to stop the next couple of cars, who knows? But I am doing my best to honor that time and make sure that I give back and have impact as much as I can.
That's so, I mean, yeah, I mean, that's so important while you're sharing your story, especially the very last thing you just said, that you realized that you were on this planet to do something more. I don't share it a lot when I speak about the mill, but there were three instances specifically that I can't explain why I'm here. I just shouldn't be here. When I explain them to other people that are close to me, what I went through, it's like, you shouldn't be here. And it was after the third time that I went, that's when I started the character mill, that I went, yeah. I'm clearly here for something bigger.
Yep.
Someone's got bigger plans for me than what I have, what I can even begin to recognize for myself. And that's when the character mill got launched about, it's been maybe 7 years ago.
Yeah.
Now. So yeah,
I love the Jordan Peterson quote of, the idea that you are morally obligated to do something great while you are here. And some people may look at my racquetball career and go, "Wow, you did something great." Well, let me let you in a little secret, folks. I hit a ball a little bit better than other people did, and I spent more money than I won in prize money, despite being in the top 20 in the world. Was that great? It was a great experience. How many people did it impact? I impacted way more people as a coach, and now hopefully my numbers of impact will eclipse that through public speaking. Despite having spent 15 years as a coach, I'm hoping that my reach that I do through public speaking is going to have a much larger number behind it in terms of impact and people that I've influenced in a positive way.
Sure. But I want to, because while you were sharing the story of the drunk driver and how you grabbed your phone and ran to the top of the hill, the thought kept going into my head is, how does he do that? Like, not everyone is going to, their first thought is, oh, I have to protect these other people. Most people would be either mad that, oh my God, what are you doing? I can't believe they did this. But your first instinct is to go there. And you can certainly correct me if I'm wrong, but I think knowing athletes at a high level like you are and like you coached, that level of competitiveness requires a certain mental strength and mental toughness that in that time, I would argue that your training and your experience at that level in competitive sports gave you the wherewithal to problem solve so quickly that you went, this is the immediate need.
I am going to correct you a little bit because I had a flash as I climbed out of the car to go kick that guy's teeth in.
Okay.
In all honesty,
Sure.
what I had just experienced, that was my initial thought. And as I was climbing out of the car and could see the headlights coming down the hill, the next thought process was, I have to get those people to stop.
Gotcha.
And, you know, I didn't lose consciousness. I had had a moment where immediately after the crash, I could hear somebody screaming, oh my God, over and over and over. And it sounded like it was coming from my back seat. And the best explanation I have is that the impact of that crash knocked my soul into the back seat, and that's what was screaming. And after a couple of seconds, I came back together into one piece and realized, oh, I might be hurt. I got to solve this problem. And I started feeling around on the floorboard for my phone to try to find a way to get help to come to us. And because of where the crash occurred, I had no cell signal. It took 45 minutes for the paramedics to get there. Again, how I was so lucky to climb out of the car without a broken ankle or broken leg or stuck in the car bleeding profusely, praying that the paramedics get there in time. Like, any of that could have been a very viable outcome of what I experienced. And yet I climbed out of the car and ran up the hill to get the next set of cars to stop. So just like you said, you had 3 warning shots before it finally got through your thick skull. Hey, I should be doing something different. I had never pursued public speaking, even though I was interested in it. Apparently, this was my warning shot that, hey, pay attention. You need to do something big before your time's up.
Yeah. Yeah. Knocked your soul into the back seat.
That's the best explanation I have for what I experienced in that moment. Yeah.
That is powerful. I'm going to be pondering that one for most of the day, for most of the day. So let's get into, you mentioned your word that you chose, since all of the podcasts have, a one word baseline, but your word is resiliency.
Yes.
How do you define that? And is that a word that helps shape the speaking that you're doing as well?
No doubt. And there's an ancient Chinese philosophy saying that, fall down 7 times, get up 8. And I am completely ink free, but if I was going to get a tattoo, that might be the one in the Chinese characters that read that message. Because I really, in my mind, that's what it all comes down to. Whether it was when I moved to Phoenix against my will as a 12-year-old, or got injured as a wrestler and then became a racquetball player and then reached the end of my racquetball career, and then the car crash, the successes and failures I've had in my business career, like, everything comes down to, can you take a hit and keep going? Can you get up, dust off, try again, or realize this isn't the direction I need to go? Let's take a step to the right and try to figure out something else. Because really, that's what it comes down to. Lots of people are afraid to put themselves out there and try anything of significance. Some people try once and like, oh yeah, that didn't work. Okay, not for me. Back to the safe spot in the middle of the crowd. A few of us are ambitious and driven enough to try to do something inspiring and or great or impactful, whatever the right defining word would be. And to do that, you're going to be sorry to be talking in cliches here, but success is standing on a pile of failures that didn't end up burying you. I think Dave Ramsey was quoted with saying that. Anytime you try something big or different or impactful, you're going to have a bunch of stumbles, a bunch of belly flops. Eventually, at some point, maybe you'll end up on top. But the number of failures is greatly going to exceed the number of successes that you have until you reach a certain level and figure out how to stay there. And that's really what it comes down to. If you're resilient enough to just keep going, to keep trying, or to try something new, pivot into something else, and put all of your effort into that now, eventually you will get to that point that you are doing something that is not only self-satisfying, but hopefully great and impacting some or all of the rest of the world.
Oh, yeah. I hope people, if you're listening to the podcast, just hit rewind for a couple minutes and go back and then listen to all of it. It's so important. I keep thinking of when I think the founder of Starbucks was told no 278 times before someone finally believed. And I don't drink coffee, but I know a lot of people that are listening probably can relate and say thank you to Starbucks. Yeah, and it's interesting. My wife sent me a quote this morning, and it said, "If it excites you and scares you at the same time, it probably means you should do it."
Yep, no doubt. If you're not doing something that scares the crap out of you, you're not dreaming big enough.
Yeah, I love that. So,
yeah.
I want to get your thoughts on one other thing, and I'm gonna read it to you, and then I'd love for you to tell me what your thoughts are on it. And as we let our light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fears, our presence automatically liberates others.
I love that quote. I'm trying to think the name of the movie. I can picture Samuel L. Jackson standing in the gym talking to the basketball team. And then at the end of the movie, one of the kids that was his problem kid in the beginning of the movie quotes that to him. Coach Carter, thank you. So that was such an awesome scene, and I love that quote. And kind of circling back to what I shared earlier about facilitating the metamorphosis from caterpillar to butterfly. Like, I don't know if I necessarily agree that every single person walking the planet has some special gift that would impact the entire world, but everybody has something within them that can impact someone. And whether I am carving a little bit of a path or giving people permission to be audacious enough to try to chase some of these things that are seemingly so far out of reach when I start, and yet I continue to chip away at it, walk down the path, make progress, and hopefully inspire people along the way. Everybody's got their own big time, whatever it is, whatever their big thing is. It doesn't have to be, that you're the number one tennis player in the world or that you made the college basketball team. It could be, I am going to help somebody. I'm going to give somebody a smile that I haven't seen smile in 3 days. That coworker that not very many people talk to, that I walk past their desk every day without saying a whole lot, who looks up and looks like they've got something heavy on their mind, like maybe just stopping and saying, "Hey, how are you doing?" That might be something that alters that person's life, because none of us know what anyone else is dealing with, what battles they're fighting. And sometimes something as innocuous and simple as a smile or a kind gesture of, "Hey, how you doing? How was your weekend? What's going on?" That can make a world of difference for one person. And that may check the box of you having the impact. Chris, you and I are aiming a little casting a wider net, trying to have as much impact as possible. But I firmly believe that every person could have an impact on at least one other person during their time here.
Man, Darren, I'm so glad you said that. And again, I'm going to encourage the listeners, if you're listening as driving your car or doing dishes in the kitchen, just stop for a moment and think about what Darren just commented on. I have the opportunity through the podcast to interview a lot of people, and I think I've got a waiting list of I'm up over 80 people that have inquired about being on this, and
Mhm. Wow.
I get to be choosy, and I get to hand pick. And before anyone comes on the podcast, we always have a conversation with folks because I want to judge their character. I want to see if they're a good fit for me, but also am I a good fit for them, because it needs to be mutually beneficial. And the quote that I read, for anyone that doesn't know, is off of Darren's website. And so, the level of character from you, Darrin, is just off the chart. Like that your level of commitment and attention and compassion and empathy for others is just it radiates through a computer screen. So I want to say that first. But
Thank
the
you very
other
much.
part that I wanted to mention was you hit on something so important of just a simple smile. And this is crazy how the universe works, but literally before we jumped onto the podcast today, I was watching a story of someone who was telling a story about the Golden Gate Bridge and how
I
there
know
were,
exactly what you're about to say.
yeah,
This is amazing. Please
there's like
share.
3,200 people that have jumped off of the Golden State Bridge, and something like 36 or 39 ultimately did not survive that jump. And the one story that I heard was a gentleman from New York that moved to San Francisco, got an apartment, and was there living. And then one day woke up, walked 2 miles to the bridge, and jumped, and unfortunately did not make it. And when the police went back to his apartment to investigate, see what the cause was, there was a note there that for the most part, I guess, simply read, "I'm going to walk to the bridge, and if one person along this route smiles at me, I won't jump."
Yep.
Like that. Again, we talk about it with adventures. You mentioned it with just simple acts, but I mean,
Yep.
adventures for us can be as simple as whatever it means to that person. And boy, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that hit me today. I had not heard that story before today. But man, it is just a simple smile can have the impact on someone's life.
Yeah, I don't know that that's a recent story because I had heard that a long time ago, and
I don't think it is. Yeah.
yeah, it really hammered me when I heard it, and that stuck with me for a long time because it's so easy for us to be so tied up in what we're doing, and as the old saying goes, if you walked into a room of 20 people and everybody threw their troubles into a pile, you would gladly grab yours and run, right? And yet we always think, oh my gosh, like why me? Why is this happening? I've got so much to deal with. And everybody is in that same boat. And I've got friends I know a couple of guys that are billionaires. I don't know them very closely, but I know of them and socially interact with them, or not recently, but a while ago. Lots of millionaires. It doesn't matter how much money is in your bank account. There's always problems. There's always things to deal with. And in fact, in some ways, those things amplify the farther up the wealth ladder you climb. But it's like, again, there's times where I'm hanging out with starving college. I spent 15 years hanging out with starving college students, which is, a little generalization, but in many cases that's accurate. And those were some of the happiest times that people were experiencing. They didn't realize that till 5 years later when I ran into them somewhere and looked back and went, "Oh my gosh, coach, I miss those days, man. We had so much fun. Thank you for what you did." Like, I didn't know how good I had it. And at that time, I'm talking kids through everything from my professor hates me and I got a C on this test. I'm gonna have to take the class over, to, my girlfriend dumped me or my boyfriend did this or whatever. Like, it's like at the moment those things seem monumental until you get past it and look backwards and go, oh, wait a minute, that wasn't as bad as I thought. And everybody walking the planet has their own bucket of stuff that they're dragging behind them with those kind of things in it. And yet we all think we're the only ones. And that little smile or that little acknowledgement of somebody, hey, how you doing? How you been? Like that can mean wonders to somebody.
Yeah. It is powerful. It is powerful for sure. And during the podcast, I always love to throw out as many little tips or thoughts that we can for folks that to help on a daily basis. And I it seems like in every podcast I always refer, to two things. Devin Bandison, a coach, has this wonderful 30-day challenge of have to get to, that I don't
Uh-huh.
have to do this, I get
Yep.
to. And
Yep.
regardless of what it is, I get to. And it just
Yep.
kind of changes our approach. And yeah, simple things. So Darrin, when you're speaking, do you I make it pretty clear with through the Character Institute stuff. When I do speaking, and the folks that I work with tend to be in that 18 to kind of that younger age
Mhm.
group. When you're speaking, do you find that your message is being directed more towards a specific group?
One of the things I love about speaking is that you can have a really diverse audience. So I do some stuff in the corporate world. I'm the VP of sales at my company in my day job, and so I've got a talk here locally in Arizona coming up for a sales mentoring group. But what I enjoy the most, I guess, is the best way to put it, is to be in front of that 18 to 20 something college age group. I'm sure some of that goes back to my days as a coach because I spent so much time with that peer group. But I love the idea of being able to shorten some learning curves and gives people some different perspective. Like, and this is just off the top of my head, but one thing that comes up a lot is that we all hear the advice, find something that you're passionate about, and then that'll be your career. I hate that advice. And I'll tell you what, a couple of reasons. One, passions don't always pay the bills. And I experienced that personally as a pro racquetball player. It was the one thing I was sure of from 16 to 30. Well, 29. I should have retired at 29 instead of 30. In that time frame, it was the one thing that I was absolutely sure I wanted and needed to do. What I should have done was been a fireman who played pro racquetball. Now, instead of scrounging a living out of a sport that's barely paying my bills, and I'm standing in the service box thinking, okay, I need to win this game and the next one to get a prize money check to pay my rent at the end of the month. I'm not thinking about hitting a good serve. I'm thinking about winning so I can pay rent at the end of the month. That's not conducive to good performance, right? So the the idea of having the ability to do something that pays the bills and having a passion project on the side that if it never makes you a dime, it doesn't matter. To me, that is much better life advice. Unless you want to be an entrepreneur, you have to go all in. There is no part-time entrepreneur thing that's going to work, right? You have to work 80 or 90 hours a week just so you can avoid working 40 hours for somebody else. Anything short of that, I think find a job that you at least like and that pays the bills, and then have your passion project on the side. And if that never makes you a dime, it doesn't matter because it fulfills you in other ways that make it worthwhile. That's something that I share with a younger audience that I don't think they ever hear often enough.
If there's someone, and I hope every single person who fits in that bracket, regardless of in that bracket or not, I think they could all benefit. But is there, if someone is interested and wants to learn a little bit more about what you're doing and that type of thing, should they just reach out to you directly, or what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I've got a couple of things that I'm doing. I mean, I'm always looking for speaking opportunities. My website is a great resource to connect with me and to find out more about me and which one of my stories might be the most applicable in a speaking engagement. I do a little bit of one-on-one coaching. I'm very, very selective as to who I do that with, partly because I just have to be protective of the time that I do have. And then one of the things that I've done recently is I created a Discord server that is a ongoing resource for 18 to, let's say, 25-year-olds. And the reason I give that a little bit wider of a range than just college kids is, as a high school senior, there's things that I think could be helpful to know going into college or not going to college and entering the workforce. As a as a college freshman, and then on the rest of your college years, there are things that you should be doing in college to prepare yourself as effectively as possible for the real world, including adding things to your life resume until you have enough of a professional resume that speaks for itself. you've got to find ways to stand out as a graduate other than saying I'm a graduate. Like, okay, great. So you showed up at class most of the time, you graduated with a 3.2 GPA, and that was it. Did you join a sports club team? And did you show not only the desire, but the consistency and discipline to show up every day and to make the team and compete at something? Were you the club treasurer or the club president, where other people trusted you to do certain aspects of that role? Those are the kind of things that are one part of the college experience. Getting internships, volunteering places, whatever. Those are all things that I talk about inside the Discord server. And the way that I do that is two different approaches. One is 3 to 5 minute videos with one particular topic. And like one of my bigger categories is resume writing and interview prep. So if you want to know how you should answer the question, why should we hire you? I have a 5 minute video on that of how I would answer that question. So it's meant to be an ongoing resource for an ever-growing number of kids that are, again, in that 18 to 25 range, so that they don't have to learn things the hard way like you and I did. Like I learned an awful lot of things the hard way, messed it up, came back, did it halfway better, messed it up again, came back, did it right. If I can just leapfrog people to getting it mostly right coming out of the gate, they're going to get jobs faster. They're going to get their lives established faster. They're going to miss some of the pitfalls and, going into debt, racking up credit card bills that I wasn't smart enough to not do when I was that age. All those things, I'm trying to shorten someone's learning curve. The other way within the server I do that is I do ask me anything sessions where I will do an open dialogue discussion for an hour at a time and encourage people to come ready with questions so that it is a community learning environment. It's not meant to be one-on-one. It's meant to be a bunch of people that all are available at that time that come to me with questions on job searches or basic personal finance things, adulting 101 questions. Like there's a lot of stuff out there that isn't taught in school and not everybody gets to learn at home. I'm trying to help fill that void a little bit, and the Discord server has been a great way for me to do that.
That's awesome because I can't, because I work with that same age group.
Yeah.
I can't emphasize, again, if you're listening or if you know of someone, please make sure you reach out to Darrin. I coach high school football and I'm very big on the football team volunteering within the community. So we do something with the Rockport Garden Club. Awesome. We go once a month to the food pantry and we help them restock the shelves because for the most part, it's elderly folks that are manning the food place, and they just can't lift some of these boxes. Whereas I can bring in 2 or 3 players, and what takes them a half a day, and my guys knock it out in 25 minutes, and they're so appreciative. But I do it for 2 reasons. One, to instill the sense of community within these guys. Like, hey, you play on Friday night, and it's a lot more fun playing in front of 600 people than it is in front of 30. So you want the community to come support you. Well, you need to do your part. You need to give back and support your community. The other part I tell them is, like you said, if you graduate with a 3.2, when you apply for a job, you're one of thousands. But they're going to then look into that, the finer parts of your resume. Are you volunteering? Are you doing these extra things for your community? Are you the treasurer of your club? And they're going to look at all the little peripheral things to really fine tune to see who they want to take the next level with. And that's what I try to stress with my high school athletes is, create your resume. You need to start creating your resume, not only for college, but post-college. And it starts now.
It does. There's no doubt, because lots of people won't. And if you don't have to be a rock star coming out of college. You need to be a little bit better and more well-rounded than your competition, which is everybody else that just graduated and is applying to those same jobs. That's really what it comes down to. You're not a complete product yet by any means. But if you are a little bit more well-rounded than your peers who are competing for the same jobs, you're going to get the nod more often than not, for sure.
Absolutely. That's important. So folks, I will be sure to include all of Darrin's contact information in the notes. So please be sure to check that out. And as we end up, Darrin, I always try to end with this question, a 2-parter. One, what do adventures mean to you? And do you have any adventures coming up in the near future?
I do. So this may sound funny based on what we've shared so far. But one of the things that adventures do for me is get me out of my comfort zone. Now, I know that sounds antithetical to some of the things I've talked about, right? But I am a little guilty of being hesitant to do certain things. Like my wife and I went to New York City for the first time in my life last summer. And I had preconceived notions about what that was going to be like. And we traveled on the subways and we were in Times Square and when it's super busy and all that stuff. And I was uncomfortable the entire time. And I need that kind of exposure for growth. And I know that, but it is an internal conflict that I have. And my wife is one of the things I love about her. One of the many things is that she is pretty fearless. In fact, at times to the point where I'm like, babe, hold on a second. Let's think about what you're talking or what you're suggesting here, right? And so we meet in the middle. I rein her in a little bit. She pulls me out of my comfort zone a little bit. So for me, adventures are everything from a fly fishing trip to going to New York City. So to get to the second part of your question, we have a trip scheduled later this year to hike the Camino del Santiago Trail in Portugal. Now, my only times out of the country has been to Mexico and Canada, and one brief stint in Jamaica where I was the guest racquetball pro at Sandals Resort for a week. I have not traveled the world, and I have never had a huge desire to do so. Some of that is my own fears of, gosh, I don't speak the language. Like, what if something like other people do it all the time, and I know that. And there's plenty of times where if I am nervous about something, all I have to do to remind myself is, oh yeah, other people do this. And if those people can do it, why not me? But I still have that internal conflict in, that voice in my head, like, ooh, be careful. Like you never know. Like what if, like, that's no way to live. And as adventurous and bold as I have been in some areas, in other ways, I still have to force myself to be adventurous and experience things that I may not have even been on my radar. And so for me, adventure is, sucking it up and grabbing my nose and jumping, right? Like there's very few things that you can't deal with if you're smart or get help from somebody, right? Like I've got Google Translate on my phone. Like if I can't find an English speaker in the vicinity, okay, I can speak Portuguese or I can speak English to my phone and it will speak Portuguese to the person standing in front of me. Right? Like I'm lost. Where do I go? Right? Like Google Translate will fix that problem for me. And yet it's a constant battle that I have. So having adventures, not only as a thing to work towards, but to truly stretch and grow myself is very, very important.
I'm so glad you said that because again, the adventures don't have to be climbing Mount Everest or jumping out of an airplane. They can be just so simple. And I think the other important part is that everybody has that human nature of kind of second guessing or question, or that thing that holds us back. Ultimately it's what protects us in certain situations.
Yes, no doubt.
But recognizing it and saying, okay, I still need to do it. Yeah. That's the important part. And something that we're trying to really do with the mill is to get people into an environment, into a community that supports that decision making and helps people get into that headspace. And then through character partners and other things, helps reduce the barrier and the reasons why you can't do it. We want to make it easier for people to chase the adventures, how simple or as complex as those adventures may be.
Yeah, I mean, growing up, coming from humble beginnings and being a starving racquetball player till age 30, there was a lot of things I wasn't exposed to. I didn't have the means to do it. But then again, I traveled around the country, went to cities where I knew no one until I made some friends on the pro tour. That was very adventurous, but it was tied to the one thing that I was so passionate about. I was not going to let anything stand in my way. When it just comes to, well, hey, let's go to New York. We've never been there. It's like, well, why? What's in New York? Like, and looking back on that trip, like coming home, I was like, man, am I glad I did that? Like, I took pictures. We ate pizza at Joe's Pizza down, in Times Square, right? Like, like just little things like that I will refer back to over the course of the rest of my life. I mean, there's probably been some significant changes to life in New York since we've been there. So maybe I got to see it before things, really changed and are different. And, okay, check that off the list. Going to Portugal, that was never on my radar. I mean, being a fly fisherman, there's a whole bunch of places I want to go in around the US and around the world to fly fish before I ever worried about, going on a coastal hiking trail, right? But my wife and her family came up with this idea, and I'm like, okay, sure, let's do it. And I committed to it, and we're going to do it. And in 2025, my wife and I are hoping to go to Japan and hike Mount Fuji. And
Ooh.
that would be, we have to time it right because we don't really want to, hike in the, blizzard conditions and things that can occur with, in certain parts of the year. But, there's a climbing stick that you purchase at the bottom of the mountain, and there's different levels you go to where they brand it with, basically like the Chinese characters and the writing of, or sorry, Japanese characters and writing of, you made it to this elevation or this checkpoint. That's going to hang in our living room and be a talking point for the rest of our lives. I don't speak Japanese. I don't know a lot about the culture. There's a lot of, unknown things in that trip. But I'm going anyway. Like I'll figure it out once we get there, or, in the midst of things. I am just doing my best to not let those largely unfounded fears and my cautious nature to hold me back from experiencing amazing things.
I hope folks that are listening will listen to that again, and then just remove the Japan part or the climbing and insert their adventure, because what you just said is so, I mean, you're going on in this adventure and you're going to have some, a piece of memorabilia from it, and it's going to be something that you will talk about for the rest of your life. And that could be, so whatever adventure folks you're thinking of, just insert that into what Darrin just said, and there's the reason why you should chase it and go after it.
Yeah, and my question is, what are you waiting for? Because believe me, having faced death head on, literally, you never know when your card gets pulled. You have no reason to think that you're going to live forever, die at 110 with your family members standing around your hospital bed as you slowly drift off into the next life. Like, that's not promised to any of us. Don't wait for a warning shot. Go do what you think you want to do.
And we're going to end there because that is the best advice. I can't top that advice. So that is it. So Darrin, again, I'm going to include all of your ways to connect to you. And I hope people that are listening, please take the time to reach out, check out his website, check out what he's doing, get him to speak at your company. Your employees will thank you for that. And if you're a young person listening, please make sure you reach out to Darrin. And yeah, Darrin, I knew I was going to have a great time with this, and I did. And so I appreciate all of your time and sitting down with me today.
Chris, it was my pleasure. Thank you.
In today's episode of Character Talks, we delved into the riveting journey of Darrin Schenck, a true embodiment of resilience and determination. Through the highs and the lows of his life, from conquering the pinnacle of athletic achievement to enduring the harrowing aftermath of a devastating accident, Darrin's story is a testament to the indomitable human spirit. What emerged from our conversation was not just a tale of triumph over adversity, but a profound commitment to giving back and inspiring others. Darrin's transformation from athlete to coach, from survivor to beacon of hope, is nothing short of extraordinary. His insights into coaching athletes and guiding young minds towards success and fulfillment were nothing less than awe-inspiring. I know I even took, at my age, a whole bunch of insights from this conversation. But our journey doesn't end here. We extend a heartfelt invitation to all of our listeners to join us on The Mill, a vibrant community where the spirit of Darrin and countless other champions thrives. It's more than just a social platform. It's a sanctuary for those who refuse to settle for mediocrity and dare to embrace life's adventures with gusto. As always, we are so appreciative of your support in liking, sharing, and reviewing our podcast. Your engagement fuels the mission to spread stories of resilience, courage, and triumph. So together, let's forge ahead into the boundless expanse of life with Darrin's unwavering spirit lighting our way, and we'll see you all in the mill.
Treat the world the way walk through the grass just after it's been cut. And wade through the stream or maybe run through the river.